Hi everyone, I'm super excited to announce that Russell Sensei's Short Stories 2, or Lassuru Sensei no taんぺんしゅう2, is now officially available on my website, easyjapanesestories.com. I just wanted to make a brief video here describing some of what I've done with it and the philosophy behind it, and how I'm kind of expecting it to be used. I will put a link at the end of the video to a longer video I made about how I teach with this first short stories book I made, because how this fits into my program is going to be very similar. This is really just a continuation of the first one. So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, both of these books follow the same general idea. We want the kids to learn, or sorry, students of any age, to learn Japanese through actually reading it in context as opposed to trying to memorize artificial grammar rules. So in the first book, I introduce about 55 words at about 10 new unique words a chapter, and then constantly reusing them throughout. So the second book actually starts off at chapter 6, just continuing where the first book left off. So you've got like the 50 some odd words from the first book and introducing about another 10 new words a chapter-ish. Sometimes it's like 11 or 12, but I try and stick right around there. There's a couple different things that I did with this so that I wanted to point out. So this right here is the edition that I will be using with my students. So this is, I'm calling it the Furigana edition, sorry. So for the first book, I did for my students, and the edition of the book that I use, the Hiragana only edition, I didn't use any katakana or kanji, and anytime I would have used a katakana word, which is quite often, I just put it in English because I wanted to take away that extra layer of difficulty. But moving on, obviously we need to introduce katakana. But I didn't want to shock them too much because to me, there's two steps involved in learning katakana. One, of course, is learning how to pronounce the characters, but the other is trying to read a word in katakana, bounce it around in your head a little bit, and figure out what English word it's trying to copy. Because until you've done that for a while and gotten some practice with it, it can actually be quite difficult. Sometimes we forget how difficult it is for beginners to figure that out. So for me, the next step in this was I did use katakana in all the stories quite a bit, but there's the hiragana pronunciation guide, the furigana, right above the katakana. So what this does is it gives the students a chance to see the katakana without making them completely frustrated if they can't read katakana yet. But it also gives them practice having to try to sound it out, because the pronunciation guide is just that. It just shows how the katakana is pronounced. It doesn't tell you what the word is. So you have to try and sound it out yourself. And if you're not sure, of course, as always, there's a full glossary in the back of the book, so you can always look up what it is. So to me, that's the next step for katakana. And in the third book, whenever I get around to that, there'll be no furigana for the katakana. That'll be the final step, just plain katakana. The other thing that I'm really excited about in this edition of the book is gradually introducing kanji. So both in this edition and in the katakana kanji edition, I use all the normal katakana and kanji that I would. But in this edition, in the furigana edition, there's furigana for most of the kanji, but for every chapter, I chose 3 words that I thought were important and that occurred a lot in that chapter and that they had seen a lot, and I took away the furigana for those 3 words. So, for example, in the first chapter, that would be watashi, ikimasu, and otou-san. I don't know if you can see it up there. So right from chapter 6, you don't have any furigana for those 3 words. And then in chapter 7, add 3 new words to that. Chapter 8, 3 new words. So that by the time you're done the 5 chapters of the book, you've kind of accidentally learned 15 kanji, at least how to read them, which is what I focus on more with my students, particularly at this level. Of course, there is the katakana kanji edition of the book if you don't want any furigana for your students. I know some people follow that route, which is why I make both editions available. So anyways, if you're looking for some interesting readings for your students that can actually be something that's enjoyable even at a relatively beginner level, I would highly recommend these two books. Of course, I would recommend you start with the level 1 because it nicely introduces a lot of the vocab that you're going to be seeing in the short stories book 2. At the end of this video, in a second, I am going to scroll through some of the pages and glossary and stuff of the book so you can take a peek. But if you also, you can follow the links to my website in the description, easyjapanesestories.com, and you can download a sample there or preview a few pages right on the webpage, whatever works for you. And I hope you enjoy the book. Lastly, if you're looking for ways like how am I supposed to incorporate this into my program, how am I supposed to teach with this if you're a teacher, I made a video to go along with how I teach my first book. It's a longer video that explains how exactly this fits into my curriculum. Spoiler, this basically is my curriculum. But I made a longer video for that, so I'll make sure that's one of the suggested videos at the end. Check that out if you're interested in learning more. Otherwise, leave any comments for me if you have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And now I will scroll through some of the book for you so you can get an idea of what it looks like. I'll scroll through the furigana edition. The katakana kanji edition is exactly the same, just imagine it without any furigana. You can see that there's still, as with the first book, 4 stories for each chapter, the last one generally being a longer story, although all the stories in this book are a little bit longer, which is why this book is, I think, about double the length of the first book, because students are just able to read more in the same amount of time. Here's the first story, Otou-san wa doko desu ka? So you'll notice already right at the beginning, in the first sentence there, watashi doesn't have any furigana. A little later in that sentence, saying ikimasu doesn't. But the students do have the little new kanji in brackets to show them the 3 new words, so they're not stuck trying to look them up in the dictionary the first time they're confronted with kanji without the furigana. So very similar throughout. You can pause if you actually want to read this. Once I get through a few pages here, we'll move on to the glossary. And this sample is downloadable at my website. So glossary here, for the furigana edition, again, you'll see that the first time a kanji comes up, you do have the furigana, so that it's easy for the kids to still look it up based on the pronunciation. And just because there's so much katakana, but a lot of the time the kids don't need to look it up, I didn't want it to make it harder to look up other words. So I put the katakana in a separate glossary at the back, which thankfully isn't a problem in Japanese because it's so easy to recognize katakana compared to other words. So all the katakana is here with furigana. And that's it. For more information, leave some questions in the comments, visit my website, and I hope you find the book helpful.